At the age of 30, Jobs had been forced out of the company he founded and now had to figure out what to do with the rest of his life. Jobs felt Scully had launched a coup and that the people he had trusted most had betrayed him, but he refused to let it hold him back. He still loved what he did and decided to start a new company, Next Computer, developing hardware and software for the academic world. Getting fired from Apple was the best thing that could have ever happened to me. The heaviness of being successful was replaced by the lightness of being a beginner again. Less sure about everything, it freed me to enter one of the most creative periods of my life. Steve Jobs. Next's products were innovative, but priced too high for the market. After only a year in business, the company was running out of cash when Jobs scored a $20 million investment from Texas billionaire Ross Perot. The cash infusion let Jobs continue to innovate, developing technology that would be used to create pioneering PC video game engines, a food delivery application using geolocation, and a model for developing web applications that would inspire the Apple Store and iTunes stores years later. Sometimes when you innovate, you make mistakes. It is best to admit them quickly and get on with improving your other innovations. Steve Jobs. In 1986, Jobs bought Pixar, the computer graphics division of Lucasfilm, the production company of Star Wars creator George Lucas. To show off Pixar's technology, the company had created a short film in 1983 that featured a computer-animated lamp. The film won an Academy Award, but Pixar was struggling to make money. Jobs kept bailing Pixar out with his own money because he knew Pixar had great technology. He just had to figure out the right business model to make a profit and stay in business. After much trial and error, Jobs focused Pixar on building the tools to create feature-length computer-animated films. When Jobs approached Disney with the proposition, Pixar scored a 3-film production deal with Disney. Pixar's first feature, Toy Story, became a record-setting global blockbuster and changed animation forever. A few weeks later, Pixar went public, and Jobs' investment returned billions. Pixar had finally achieved success, but it had been 10 years in the making and clouded with doubt the whole time. Just as important for Jobs, his experience with Pixar humbled him and made him more empathetic, setting him on the path to creating great new products when he eventually returned to Apple. For the past 33 years, I've looked in the mirror every morning and asked myself, if today were the last day of my life, would I want to do what I'm about to do today? And whenever the answer has been no for too many days in a row, I know I need to change something. Steve Jobs. In his 1994 interview with the Silicon Valley Historical Association, Jobs explained what inspired him. When you grow up, you tend to get told the world is the way it is, and your job is to just live your life inside the world. Try not to bash into the walls too much. Try to have a nice family life, have fun, save a little money. That's a very limited life. Life can be much broader once you discover one simple fact, and that is, everything around you that you call life was made up by people that were no smarter than you. And you can change it. You can influence it. You can build your own things that other people can use. The minute that you understand that you can poke life and actually something will, if you push in, something will pop out the other side, that you can change it, you can mold it. That's maybe the most important thing. It's to shake off this erroneous notion that life is there and you're just going to live in it, versus embrace it, change it, improve it, make your mark upon it. I think that's very important. And however you learn that, once you learn it, you'll want to change life and make it better. Because it's kind of messed up in a lot of ways. Once you learn that, you'll never be the same again. Steve Jobs. In 1997, Apple's attempts to upgrade the Mac operating system were failing. Without Jobs, innovation had stalled and Apple was 90 days from bankruptcy. Apple begged Jobs to come back, agreeing to buy Next for $429 million, both to acquire its operating system and bring Jobs back in an advisory capacity to help guide the company. Jobs' time with Pixar had taught him to be a better listener. Now he asked the original Apple employees why they were still working there. They told him it was because they still believed in what Apple was doing and what the company originally stood for. Jobs summoned Apple's top staff to an early morning meeting and forced them to acknowledge what was wrong. As Jobs would tell them, the products sucked. They didn't have sex anymore. Jobs was right. Apple had stopped making products that people desired. His new outlook helped Apple scrap what wasn't working and usher in a new line of products under the Think Different campaign, with Apple tying its brand to iconic figures from the 20th century, such as Einstein, Picasso, Dylan, Lennon, Martin Luther King Jr., and Gandhi. What is Apple, after all? Apple is about people who think outside the box. People who want to use computers to help them change the world, to help them create things that make a difference, and not just to get a job done. Steve Jobs. With the success of the Think Different campaign, Jobs set out to revolutionize the music business.
An odd couple, the most glamorous face in world music and the slightly less glamorous chief executive of a nerdish computer company, joining forces today to get the notoriously Luddite music industry to embrace the internet.
There's a lot of competitors out there, OD2 and Virgin and these other guys, but we think we have a much, much better product. So we'll see if people agree with us.
In 2001, Apple launched its first iPod MP3 player that could hold 1,000 songs and was 30 times faster than any other MP3 player on the market.
The music industry is encumbering 10% of the music it ships, but not 90%. And it doesn't make sense, and some consumers, it gets in their way. They want to know that if they buy a track off one store, they can play it on any player without any hassle.
But didn't that help you sell iPods? I mean, are you not kind of...
We don't think so, no. We think we've sold iPods because they're the best music players in the world.
Music's been around forever. It will always be around. This is not a speculative market. And because it's part of everyone's life, it's a very large market all around the world. It knows no boundaries. Steve Jobs. You can learn more by reading Corey Wayne's book, Mastering Yourself, for free on his website, understandingrelationships.com, by subscribing to the newsletter. In 2003, at age 48, Jobs faced his greatest challenge. He was diagnosed with a rare form of pancreatic cancer. After surgery to remove the tumor, doctors gave him a good prospect for recovery. But the illness reminded Jobs of his own mortality and would push him to new heights of product development. Remembering that you're going to die is the best way I know to avoid the trap of thinking you have something to lose. You are already naked. There's no reason not to follow your heart. Steve Jobs. By 2004, Pixar had 5 blockbusters under its belt with Toy Story, A Bug's Life, Toy Story 2, Monsters, Inc., and Finding Nemo. Attempts to negotiate a new deal between Jobs and Disney CEO Michael Eisner broke down, with Jobs vowing never to do business with Disney again. But in 2005, Eisner was forced out and replaced by Robert Iger, who quickly worked to restore relations with Pixar. The result? Disney agreed to buy Pixar for $7.4 billion in 2006, making Jobs Disney's largest shareholder. Now Jobs took on responsibility for running both Apple and Pixar. In this dual role, he would guide both companies to even greater heights, but run himself ragged in the process. I've always been attracted to the more revolutionary changes. I don't know why. Because they're harder, they're much more stressful emotionally. And you usually go through a period where everybody tells you that you've completely failed. Steve Jobs. At Apple, Jobs added video content to iTunes in 2006 to do the same thing for video he'd done for music. At Pixar, a new franchise was created with the release of the first Cars movie. But in public appearances, Jobs was noticeably gaunt, and there was rampant speculation about his health. The truth was, his cancer had come back.
Steve Jobs will continue as chief executive during his sick leave, but judging by the fall in Apple's share price today, financial investors will want him back, working his magic as soon as possible.
Remembering you'll be dead soon helps make the big choices in life. Steve Jobs. In 2007, Apple TV was rolled out, allowing users to wirelessly play iTunes content on their TV sets. But Apple's biggest success came later that year with the release of the first iPhone. Touted by Jobs as a revolutionary and magical product 5 years ahead of any other cell phone, the iPhone would sell 6.1 million units over its first 5 quarters, and over 1.5 billion units to date. We are all born with the ultimate pointing device, our fingers, and iPhone uses them to create the most revolutionary user interface since the mouse. Steve Jobs. Even as Jobs piled up victories with Apple and Pixar, he was losing his battle with cancer. But he still had one more great product up his sleeve. Unveiled in 2010, as Jobs recovered from a liver transplant, the iPad was another home run, selling 50 million units through 2011 and over 360 million to date. But by August 2011, Jobs' health had deteriorated to the point he was forced to resign as Apple's CEO. I've always said if there ever came a day when I could no longer meet my duties and expectations as Apple's CEO, I would be the first to let you know. Unfortunately, that day has come. I believe Apple's brightest and most innovative days are ahead of it, and I look forward to watching and contributing to its success in a new role. Steve Jobs. Under Jobs' leadership, Apple had created a stunning array of revolutionary products.
With the iPod and iTunes, with the iPhone, the iPad, the MacBook, Steve Jobs has reshaped entire industries. No wonder he's regarded as the most successful chief executive in corporate history.
With Pixar, Jobs beat Disney at its own game, helping to reinvent animation and launch multiple franchises. Cancer was the one challenge his reality distortion field couldn't overcome, but he would confront his impending death with dignity and grace. Your time is limited, so don't waste it living someone else's life. Don't be trapped by dogma, which is living with the results of other people's thinking. Don't let the noise of others' opinions drown out your own inner voice. And most important, have the courage to follow your heart and intuition. They somehow already know what you truly want to become. Steve Jobs. As Jobs neared the end, he thought about the meaning of life and his belief in God. He reflected that he was about 50-50 on believing in God. On the one hand, he felt that there had to be more to our existence than meets the eye. But he also wondered if death might be as simple as turning off a switch. It's strange to think that you accumulate all this experience and maybe a little wisdom, and it just goes away. So I really want to believe that something survives, that maybe your consciousness endures. Steve Jobs. In October 2011, surrounded by family, Steve Jobs began his final journey. His sister, Mona Simpson, described his death. Steve's final words, hours earlier, were monosyllables, repeated 3 times. Before embarking, he looked at his sister Patty, and then for a long time at his children, then at his life's partner, Laureen, and then over their shoulders past them. Steve's final words were, "Oh wow, oh wow, oh wow." In 56 years of life, Steve Jobs accomplished every major goal he set for himself.
Steve was a stunning visionary. He thought of ideas that he could interest the public in. He knew either what they wanted or what he could make them want. He hit many home runs out of the ballpark.
He epitomized the American dream that with good ideas, hard work and ambition, anything's possible. He was an entirely self-made man who changed the world by creating a string of insanely great products that elevated how people learn, communicate, and consume entertainment. The obstacles and setbacks he faced might have stopped any other man, but Jobs overcame them with a radical level of persistence that enabled him to actually invent the future. You can't connect the dots looking forward. You can only connect them looking backwards. So you have to trust that the dots will somehow connect in your future. You have to trust in something. Your gut, destiny, life, karma, whatever. This approach has never let me down, and it has made all the difference in my life. Steve Jobs. Steve Jobs was the ultimate inspiration. He showed us how simple perseverance, focus, relentless action, the ability to learn from mistakes, and a commitment to the heart's desire can make it possible to achieve our greatest goals and dreams. There will never be another Steve Jobs, but we can always learn from his example and apply his model for success to overcome our own challenges and reach our full potential. And we should remember, all great things take time, and Steve Jobs showed us over and over that most great successes are at least a decade in the making. Being the richest man in the cemetery doesn't matter to me. Going to bed at night saying we've done something wonderful, that's what matters to me. Steve Jobs. You can learn more by reading Corey Wayne's book, Mastering Yourself, for free on his website, understandingrelationships.com, by subscribing to the newsletter. Until next time.